They're both good and bad. Or listen, I don't want to put a label on it, but I'm talking about the spirit of revolution for better or worse. And it's just it's in the air. It's those final degrees of Uranus and Aries, I think. And then, of course, Jupiter and Sagittarius is kicking in, and people have a sense that they're right. They're right. They're right. You're wrong. This is what's happening. Jupiter and Sagittarius has this kind of expansive morality. So one of the stories I want to lead with, we're going to get into a few other things today. Cat's teeth are chattering. Wow, that's not when I read it. Your cat's teeth are chattering. It sounds like a cartoon from the 1940s or something like that. Hi, Kathleen. How are you? So I want to lead with a story which sounds a bit inconsequential on the surface, but really it's not. And the story I want to lead with today has to do with a pro basketball team. Hi, Natasha. Nice to see you. There's Anna. Hi, Anna. The basketball team is the Chicago Bulls. And, I think sports are interesting because it used to be that, we would look at music to inform us with our cultural trends. And I'm going to talk a little bit about music today. Hi, Rhonda. And I'm going to talk about sort of this Jupiter and Sagittarian effect where truth, for right or wrong, good or ill, is being expressed in a very unique way by a Sagittarian persona. I'm going to get into that today because it's an interesting story, and I think it illustrates sort of this Jupiter and Sagittarian effect, and also part of today's theme, which is about revolt. But if you go back and you look at, what you can see, like what would be happening culturally in music, like there'd be a certain change coming. When punk rock hit, it was kind of a harbinger of a change of, style, a change of stance, a change of, tearing down existing structures. People, said, we don't need, hey, Chris, Steve, we don't need record companies. We can make our own records. We can make our own fashion. We can make our own style. We can make our own music. We don't even really need to play the instruments all that well if we play it with enough fury and passion and at least three chords. We can get this message across, right? And we can see at that time that was going to have a big impact, and it was a harbinger of cultural change. And it's happened all the time with music. Look at the beginning of hip hop. The beginning of hip hop, which takes place really right around in the mainstream world around 1982, right around there, 82, 83, Run DMC, hits the scene. It's a harbinger of cultural change. Jazz. I mean, we can see where things moved and changed. Whatever genre of music. Disco was another. It was like, okay, here's disco. Disco pretends like a change in fashion, a change in ideals, a change in morality. Disco was Rome meets synthesizers and high pitched falsetto vocals from black songstresses like Donna Summer, right? I mean, it was like a massive change. So we got these windows with music, the rebirth of punk with Nirvana. And so this is what happened. We could see where it would be like this kind of impact, sudden impact, and then the cultural sort of waves would spread out. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. Music doesn't have the same kind of cultural impact that it once did. There's nothing happening in music. I mean, there's some good bands, don't get me wrong, some good music, but there's nothing happening with music. The real vanguard now of social change happens to be sports. And in particular, basketball is a major, like there are things happening in basketball in change of drugs. That's true. Absolutely. There's things happening in basketball that are really interesting. And there's some interesting characters in basketball. The Queen movie, the Queen and Lady Gaga movies are leading the charge at the cinema now. It symbolizes something. It does. I'm going to kind of get into what it symbolizes. I mean, because Lady Gaga and Queen have both been, how do we say this, hangouts for gay culture, transgender culture. I mean, Freddie Mercury is a gay icon, right? That's why they named the band Queen, right? Like drag queen, dress up like women. It's transgenderism, right? And that comes out of the 1970s. Bowie was doing it. The whole glam thing. So Queen was kind of an outgrowth. Queen comes out of the glam movement, which is why they get the name Queen, right? And so, yeah, we can talk about this because we're going to talk about transgenderism today. That's going to be part of today's rant and riff. Okay. So, but sports is like a very interesting place. Like you look at the NBA, and about 2 years ago, Kyrie Irving, who plays for the Boston Celtics, comes out and says he's a flat earther. I mean, what other sport are people going to come out and talk about being a flat earther? I think a day or two ago, Stephen Curry, who plays for the Golden State Warriors, says, "Well, we didn't go to the moon." This is one of the biggest athletes in the world, and he's basically kind of the Jay Widener camp. So we're seeing we're seeing trends now begin to take place more in sports than in music, in a lot of ways. And the NBA is kind of leading this sort of, for better or worse. And I'm not saying sports is this kind of great sort of oracular tool that we can navigate our future with now, because I think there's a lot of agendas being promoted in sports. There's a lot of illuminated agendas in sports. And that's been going on for a while, but it's really taken hold. So the sports story I want to share with you has to do with the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls just recently fired their coach, Fred Hoiberg, because the team was, terrible. And the team is young, made up of millennials. Okay. And I'm talking like right around 25, 26, 27-year-old millennials, right at that edge, right at the edge of Pluto and Scorpio, maybe a few like Pluto and Sag kids. They're probably around like 27, 28, 26 degrees, Pluto, Scorpio. Anyway, we have a new coach, and the new coach is an old school coach. And he decided, hey, we're going to run practices. We're going to have 2-hour practices. It's going to be, there's a new sheriff in town, a guy by the name of Jim Boylan, who's been coaching for a very long time. Well, the players revolted. They revolted against this guy, Jim Boylan. Now, Jim Boylan, he's no Colonel Kurtz. I mean, he's actually, just an old school coach trying to coach in an old school way. They reported his coaching methodologies or tactics or strategies to the players union. So what we're seeing this revolt. We're seeing a mutiny, basically, of a team at a professional level, which I've never seen before, by the way. And I've seen it on a college level. I followed the Cal Bears back in the 1990s when they actually revolted against their coach and got him fired. It's very, very rare, though, very rare. But in this case, we have a group of young players who are in revolt against their coach. So why is that interesting or special? Well, it's because we're moving towards this place of experiencing, like, for better or worse, right? I mean, that was their version of it. It's a bit of a snowflakey version, but it just goes to show you that there's this spirit that's still in the air with the final degrees of Uranus and Aries. Okay, so I want to move that story across the Atlantic now, because there's something really big going on in France, and it still is. What started with the Yellow Vest protest over taxes and the cost of diesel has now matriculated into the student culture, the world of academia, but at a high school level. We're not talking like the Sorbonne, right? We're talking French high school students. They're now poised to walk out of classes, okay? So the French have got the revolutionary spirit. They've got the revolutionary bug. So this is from a website called France24.com. Even as it grapples with violent demonstrations over living costs, the French government is hunkering down for a Black Tuesday of protests by high school students who have jumped onto the yellow vest bandwagon. Apparently, it's happening now. Tens of thousands of high school students have walked out of their classes and have joined the protests. Ever since May 1968, the May 1968 protests that paralyzed France, precipitated the demise of its war hero, Charles de Gaulle. French governments have been terrified by the prospect of facing a united front of workers and student protests. Here we go. While French universities are largely quiet nowadays, the prospect of a two-pronged offensive edged nearer to reality last week when high school pupils seized on the momentum from the so-called Yellow Vest movement to vent their anger at President Emmanuel Macron's educational reforms. Okay, so these high school kids, what do they have in common with what's happening now in astrology? They're born under Pluto and Sagittarius. We're seeing these high school kids wake up. They're waking up, in this spirit of the time, the spirit of revolution, when Jupiter in Sagittarius brings a sense of righteousness, truth, to some degree sovereignty, whether you're right or wrong. I mean, it's in the air, right? They're like catching this thermal updraft now because of it. Okay, so I'm going to continue to read. Up to 300 French high school students known as lycées were barricaded every day last week amid scenes of vandalism, bins set on fire, and violent clashes between police and students. The tense standoff made international headlines on Thursday when video footage posted on social media showed riot police in a Paris suburb forcing dozens of students to kneel down in rows, their hands on their heads. Now remember, the EU army has now positioned itself in Paris with their EU tanks. On Monday, France's education ministry said the number of affected schools had fallen to 120, only a third of which were fully blocked. With student unions calling for a Black Tuesday in lycées across the country on December 11th, the relative calm could prove to be merely a lull before the storm. High school students have been angered by President Macron's plans to change the end of school exam, known as the baccalaureate or BAC, and replace the broad subject areas pupils currently choose from, science, literature, or social sciences, with more specific courses. They demand the repeal of a reform passed last year, which introduces stricter selection criteria for university. Critics say the government's moves breed inequality between rich schools and poorer peripheral ones. They also oppose plans for a national civic service for French youth due to be rolled out in 2026. Isn't that interesting? National civic service. So it's like, okay, here you go. Boys and girls are going to have a stricter curriculum. It's not going to be this very broad, liberal curriculum. No, we're going to pick it for you. Now, all of a sudden, the student's like, well, hold on a second. Hold on a second. We don't really want that. We want to be able to pick and choose because we're not sure what you're going to pick for us. And now, 7 years from now, even though most of these kids will have moved on, 8 years from now, they're going to have like a national civic service. This is very interesting. We will continue protesting until our demands are met, Jules Spector of the FIDL Union told France 24. The government has made no gestures towards us. He added, on the contrary, it is obvious they're waiting for the end of term to slow down our movement. Worryingly for the Macron administration, there are tentative signs the unrest may also be spreading to universities, where students are angry at the government's plans to hike fees for non-EU nationals. in a bid to make French universities more competitive. The Sorbonne shut its main campus in central Paris in anticipation of possible protests, while students in Nanterre and Rennes too, traditionally two of France's most politicized universities, voted to blockade the facilities. A major source of concern of France's embattled government is the traditionally erratic and volatile nature of student protests, potentially incendiary elements at a time when yellow vest demonstrations have already erupted into violence in the streets of Paris and other cities. Look, the yellow vests have been infiltrated in a lot of ways by the Antifa faction, the agents provocateurs who are there to create more social chaos. We know this happens all the time. On top of their own demands, pupils in schools up and down the country have expressed solidarity with the Yellow Vest movement, which began as a protest against a tax fuel hike, but has mushroomed into a general revolt against stagnant wages and the high cost of living. If the student movement has taken hold, it is in part thanks to the Yellow Vests, says Robbie Mortar, head of GERME, that's GERME, Center for the Study of Student Movements at Sciences Po Paris, in an interview with France 24. In both cases, Mortar noted the protesters came largely from peripheral areas and small towns that are starved of public services and jobs and feel abandoned by Parisian cities. This is the Agenda 21 model, by the way. You basically limit opportunities in rural or semi-rural areas, and not just opportunities, but the services that go along with it. So next thing you know, you're kind of living in this sort of, bleak, semi-rural, post-apocalyptic, dystopian, kind of world. It's like, maybe I should go back to the city where I can actually catch a bus, or go see a doctor or whatever that is, right? So it's like they're sort of cutting these people off. It's like, we're going to raise your fuel prices so much that you're not going to be able to live out there, because you thought it was cheap and you could kind of get away from the higher cost of living in Paris. Yeah, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have to move back into the city because it's actually going to be cheaper for you on some level. And don't worry about it. We've got a nice little 250 by 250 place ready for you. In both cases, okay, so we have, this says, behind the student-specific demands, their discontent expresses a more deep-seated anxiety about jobs in particular, in fear of the future. Hello? Are you kidding? Of course. Of course. The future is seriously in doubt right now. Seriously. You look at a country like France. What does France make? What does France make? Does France make Audis? I think they make Audis. And maybe they still make the Renault, but we don't have Renaults here. We get Audis here. But the French don't make anything. And this is the problem for Western Europe. I mean, they've lost their manufacturing base. They've just they lost their manufacturing base pretty much after the war. It was all, it was devastated, blown up. Let's flip the script. Let's keep these countries from being productive and capitalistic. Let's let the social programs sort of, leach from the Berlin Wall all the way through Western Europe, turn Western Europe into basically a soft communistic or soft socialistic state, and not be involved in economic growth. This is what's happened. We're seeing the tail end of a long-term phase of economic decline because nothing's being made. I mean, perhaps things are being made, but they're not being made in a way that can actually support economies. Everything's been outsourced. So now you've got groups of people who are now starting to wake up. Like, what's going on, right? Where is our future? What are we going to be doing, especially the young people? Because the young people are still instinctual. This is the beautiful thing about youth. Youth are instinctual. Youth are in touch with their sacral energy. Their hormones are switching on, right? The sort of the Kundalini network is sort of lining up, even though in many ways it's probably blocked. It doesn't really matter. but that instinctual kind of energy that is embodied by the youth is like, okay, well, we're sensing that things, in this future are not really settled for us. So they're not just protesting against, the change in their backs. They're protesting against a future that may not include them in some way. This is a very interesting time because people will ascribe and select value and meaning. Like they'll use this baccalaureate piece, but that's really just a symbol, right? It's about power. It's about choice. It's about their ability to choose moving forward into the future, not having their future chosen for them because their options may be much more limited. And so you have this government come in as a control grid, and the control grid says, here you go. These are your options. This is what you're going to study. And oh, by the way, you're going to have to do selective service along the way. Your time of being able to, theoretically be free and make your own choices, that's coming to an end. This is what's going on here. And I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. I mean, if you understand kind of the big picture, what these people know at a high level is that choices, that careers, that jobs are going to become much more limited because of automation. So if you have kids coming in and basically performing national service or selective service or civic service, you're essentially ensuring the fact that for at least maybe 2 years, that they're going to be employed by the state in some way. And who knows what they're going to do, because their options outside of that are going to become truncated. And, these kids know it. They know it. I'm going to continue to read here. Let's see. I'm going to read the sentence again. Their discontent expresses a more deep-seated anxiety about jobs in particular and fear of the future. He added, in this respect, Education Minister Jean-Michel Blanquer is wrong to claim there is no link between the students and the yellow vests. He does not understand that the students in the street are the children of the yellow vests. So they're children of the yellow vests because those are their parents. In many cases, those are their parents. But also the children of the yellow vest means that they're probably the dispossessed children, meaning that there's a feeling of dispossession that is going through France, and not just France, but all of Western Europe. The people are really struggling to find their cultural, personal, bearings in a world that is being turned upside down, right? And it's being turned upside down with no the solution, right, or the program for where this is all headed is slowly being revealed a little at a time, right? Because the plan is already in place. So if you look at the concept of universal basic income or social credit or something like that, that would be in alignment with kids moving out of college and into sort of a French national civic service, where those kinds of ideas and those kinds of financial transactions can take place and create to some degree a bit of a bridge so that they can actually have some meaning and usefulness and make some money. Who knows what they're going to do? I have no idea what their program would be. So this is interesting. This revolt is taking place now. The spirit of revolt is in the air because people are starting to smell the future, and the future is filled with with fear, right? Have you ever? Okay, this is kind of an aside. Have you ever smelled a dead, decaying body? Okay. Have you ever smelled one? Not many people have. According to my sense is not a lot of people have, because most of the times when somebody dies, right? When somebody dies, it's taken care of pretty quickly, especially if there's a false flag involved, apparently. Especially when Anthony Scalia is involved. They dispatched him like that, right? All right. So one time I was in Seattle, and this is back in the '90s, and I parked down towards the edge of sort of the downtown area. And that part of downtown was edgy. I don't know what it's like now, but it was edgy. There were a lot of homeless people. There were these weekly apartments, monthly apartments, stuff like that, like the Tenderloin in San Francisco. So I'm walking sort of back into the center of town, and I see this van. It's this white van, and it's got city markings. And there are these two guys, and they're in hazmat suits, these white hazmat suits with goggles and everything. And they've got a gurney, and there's a body under that gurney, and I was downwind from that body. It was like, and I had this sensation of smelling, and I put it all together, right? Smelling this rotting corpse, which is why these guys were like completely hazmated. Couldn't they have put like maybe 100-foot like cone around their van experience? Because clearly I wasn't hazmated. But I'll never forget that smell. It was this acrid smell that was like rotting meat and tobacco. You know how you get that rotting meat smell? It's like you've had it in your refrigerator for about 2 or 3 weeks, and it begins to ferment, and you throw in kind of this tobacco smell. It's like, I'll never forget that smell. I think that's what a certain version of the future smells like. That's what a certain version of it. Again, we're dealing with timelines, we're dealing with possibility, probability, chance, the accumulation of intention and attention, the diverging path. What do you think, Jasper? This is what's going on. It's the spirit of revolt. This is the time that we're in. Jupiter and Sagittarius. Speaking of the spirit of revolt, or the spirit of the revolting, I got another Sagittarius story to share with you. Happens to deal with a Sagittarian personality. You might know her, Miley Cyrus. Miley Cyrus, also known as Hannah Montana, which, if you go back to my website, one of the first posts I ever did was about the programming of Hannah Montana and Miley Cyrus, and the split programming and trauma, and getting into young girls' heads. This was one of the first posts I ever did. It's like kind of headed towards a certain path. Anyway, so this is recent now. Miley Cyrus is she's a contestant judge on a TV show called The Voice, which has people like Adam Levine from that really terrible band. Kelly Clarkson is on there. The country and western guy who you know what I'm talking about. Blake Shelton left his wife for Gwen Stefani. You know The Voice. You know what I'm talking about. So Miley Cyrus she's a judge. So I'm reading you this story. It's called prepareforchange.net. Remember, keep in mind now, she's a Sagittarius. Miley speaks her mind. So here we go. Miley Cyrus left her followers shocked and confused after advising her young fans to worship Satan if they want to become rich and famous like their heroes. The former Hannah Montana star left the group of fans bewildered after passing on the pearls of wisdom when asked for tips on how to gain success in the entertainment industry. Okay, so here's how it breaks down. Following the filming of the NBC TV talent show The Voice, on which Cyrus is one of the judges, a flock of young admirers had gathered outside the backstage exit. This happens, hoping to catch a glimpse of their idol. As the Wrecking Ball singer made her way out of the exit with her security team, one of her starstruck fans asked her, "Hey, Miley, do you have any advice for any of your fans that might want to follow in your footsteps and become a star?" To which she responded, "Yeah, if you want to be rich and famous, it's easy. But don't ask me. You need to ask Satan. You can have it all." As a nervous laugh spread through the crowd, Cyrus stopped her bodyguards, seemingly annoyed by the response, and turned back to the crowd saying, "You think I'm joking? Question mark. You asked me how to make it as a pop star, and I just told you everything you need to do. If you want everything that I have, then all you have to do is ask Satan for it, and you can have it. You need to stop asking Santa for Christmas presents and praying to Jesus because none of them exist. Satan is our Lord. When you let him into your heart and worship him instead of your make-believe God, then you can have it all." Cyrus then stormed off with her entourage and jumped into the back of the Range Rover before speeding away. The group of her supporters was left shocked by her comments, with some visibly upset. The mother of one of the young fans said she was disgusted by the singer's rant. "My daughter is only 6, has been really looking forward to Christmas. Now she's asking me why I lied to her about Santa. We're a good Christian family." You're a good Christian family. You're not talking about Santa. I'm sorry. You need a wake-up call there. Miley just gave it to you. Okay? If anything, she did you a service about the Santa bullshit. Now I'm getting asked how we can please Satan, and I don't know what to tell her. Can you believe that? Little 6-year-old girl. "Mommy, how do we please Satan?" How'd you like to answer that as a parent? Well, first of all, as a parent, you should not let your child be listening to Miley Cyrus's fucking music. Okay? That's Satan's music. As a good Christian, you should have some level of discernment and understand this. Let's get clear. On some level, Miley Cyrus was helping you sort out your priorities and sort out your world vision. Too bad your daughter was there to be a part of it. Be a better Christian, right? Understand Santa has nothing to do with Christianity. Santa is Krampus. He's Krampus. He's going to come along and he's going to steal your kids. That's what Santa did. Krampus was a fucking child abductor. And we turned him into this Coca-Cola fetish idol. I was very conflicted as a parent with Santa. I was like, I'm not into this Santa thing. And unfortunately, I didn't have like sign off to find an alternative to Santa. I was Santa one time. I was Santa. I was 20 years old, and I answered, and I was always kind of looking for spot work in junior college. So it was right around the holidays, and I saw this ad on the bulletin board about Santa needed for a holiday event. And I'm like, shit, I can use some extra money. Let me call this thing up. So I call this guy up, and it's with the San Mateo Chamber of Commerce, and every year they have a Christmas parade in town. It's not a huge, big thing, but it was big enough, right? So I call this guy up, and he says, "Oh yeah, hi. You want to be Santa in the parade?" I'm like, "Sure, I'll be Santa." He says, "Okay, well, come on over, get the suit, and show up." And I think it was a Sunday. Show up Sunday at noon. I'm like, okay. So I get the suit, and that day I pillows and whole 9 yards, and I got my beard, and I was 20 years old. I looked like I was probably about 17, to be honest with you. So I go to this. I have no idea what to expect, and I go to this thing, and next thing you know, I'm on a fire truck, and I got a bag of candy canes, and there's all people waving at Santa. I'm fucking Santa Claus. I'm throwing out candy canes. Like, hey, this is great, man. I was like, I was an icon for a moment. I was like a god tossing candy cane treats to everybody. It was, and then the fire truck pulls into this parking garage downtown, covered parking, and pulls in, and then I see a line of about 200 kids. They're all waiting to sit on my lap, right? So for the next 2 hours, man, I got kid after kid after kid after kid on my lap. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Have you been a good boy, a good girl this year? Yeah. Anyway, so guilty as charged. I was Santa. I was Santa. Yes, it's true. All right, let's get back to this. Be a better Christian. Don't let your kid listen to Miley Cyrus. Get a fucking clue. All right, this isn't the first time Miley Cyrus has dealt a devastating blow to her fans. Since joining the panel The Voice just like last week, she told one of the contestants that she doesn't like pop music. It only makes that type of music because it's what they tell her to sing. When the audience gasped in amazement at the she's truthful. The chick's a Sagittarius. It's going to come out. She loves Satan. It's going to come out. She may not love Satan, but Satan's like paved her way. You know, Miley Cyrus was turned out by Billy. Miley Cyrus is a MK Ultra kid. Miley Cyrus is a Bohemian Grove kid. Just remember that. Because what they tell her to sing only makes the time acceptance hard. When the audience gasped in amazement at the admission, she scrambled to pull it back by adding, and I don't even like my own pop music most of the time, but you take a song that's on the radio that I can't even relate to and make it about you. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So here we go. The spirit of rebellion is in the air. Jupiter and Sagittarius. Miley Cyrus. The truth-telling Sagittarian oracle. Be a better Christian, Mom. Don't let your kids listen to that crap. Speaking of rebellion, all right, I'm going to lead into this piece with another piece. Okay. This has to do with Tucker Carlson. And one of the things that I've always agreed about, or at least this was my, like when Trump was, people would diss me, right? People would diss me when I was like trumpeting the energy around Trump during the run-up to the election. Trump is this and Trump is that and Trump is that. I said, I don't care. What I care about is this energy. You know, people are waking up, right? There's something happening here, right? People are starting to have their tongues untied. And I would say, look, I don't think it's wise to hitch our wagons to Trump. I think it's wise to hitch our wagons to the energy and stay with the energy because Trump's going to let you down. And basically, all your leaders are at that level, they're going to let you down. How have we not been let down? And how many times do we have to go back to that place? Oh, these are great promises. Oh, look, it's going to build a wall. It's going to do this. It's going to do that. Oh, right. People, woohoo, right. Finally, somebody. Good ideas, good intentions, execution, very difficult, out of his league. Deep state, scrambling around, trying to find ways to basically stay in office, hire the right people, bring in William Barr, ultimate fixer. Okay, this is what Tucker has to say. And it starts off with Tucker saying Trump is not capable of defunding Planned Parenthood, despite promise. Okay, so basically Tucker has been in this place where he's been saying that Trump is not really fit right now. He doesn't understand the presidency on some level. I'm going to read what he says, and it's going to lead me to this next piece, which has to do with, again, this spirit of revolt that is beginning to really catch an updraft. His chief promises were that he would build the wall, defund Planned Parenthood, and repeal Obamacare. And he hasn't done any of those things, he explained. I don't think he's capable of sustained focus. I don't think he understands the system. I don't think the Congress is on his side. I don't think his own agencies support him. The one agency that does support him is the U.S. military. He kind of left that out. But I would say for the most part, I believe he's correct. Carlson noted that that America's founding fathers designed the legislative process to be highly complex in order to diffuse government power. So in order to pass legislation, you really have to understand how it works, and you have to be very focused on getting it done. Trump, by contrast, knows very little about the legislative process, hasn't learned anything, hasn't surrounded himself with people that can get it done. Well, he's getting some things done. He got the embassy moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. No other, no, and I'm not saying that's a great thing, but no other president has done that, right? No other president has done that. So he has accomplished, one significant thing in the eyes of a lot of people to think that that's a very significant thing for them. Okay. That's not to say that Carlson doesn't still see the president performing a vital service. However, I think Trump's role is to begin the conversation about what actually matters. This is what I have been talking about. Trump has been extremely important in untying people's tongues. Okay? He said, citing immigration, trade, and NATO as examples of issues on which Trump ignited debate by asking basic questions. So this is what Trump has done. Trump has basically said, he said a lot of things, but the way that he said them and using Twitter and using his press conferences, he has emboldened people who are normally not part of a process, who have been kind of in the shadows, the silent majority. Some of them are talking, some of them are acting, some of them are doing things now that are not necessarily part of how the status quo has been unfolding over the last 30 years, let's say. Okay. And I'm going to read you a story that is connected to that. So let me see if I can find it here. All right. Hold on. Okay. So this is recent. This comes from a website called Mass Resistance. And the subtitle is Pro-Family Activism. And you would think, oh, okay, stodgy, conservative, boring, morality-based tribe. This is actually the new edge. This stuff is the new edge. Like, this is where the action is. Okay, it really is. Like, if you want the edge, this is where it's at. Why? Because you have to challenge. This is about challenging the status quo. The status quo is not conservative America. I'm not even really like championing conservative America. Like, I'm more of a libertarian in some ways. But I think challenging the status quo is very interesting. All right, I'm going to read this. So there's a group called Mass Resistance. And I'm going to put this link inside the chat because I really wanted to do a live stream today because there was an image I wanted to share with you guys. I can't put it up there on the screen, but I want to share this with you. Okay, there we go. So this is the story I'm going to be reading from. All right. So here we go. It says Mass Resistance confronts drag queen story hour in Riverside, California. See incredible video of a mother in action. I wouldn't call it an incredible video. I would call it a news story slightly slanted towards the more pro-liberal, and do as thou will, kind of anything goes narrative, right? But I digress a little. So I'm going to read this, and some of the language may offend you, but this is coming from a website. It says cross-dressing homosexuals out to disrupt the minds of a generation of children. Confrontation reported by Los Angeles NBC TV. The latest threat to young children from the LGBT movement is a horror show called Drag Queen Story Hour, and it's happening in libraries and bookstores across the country. This is true. This is true. They're literally, they've dispatched drag queens to go into libraries and bookstores to read to little kids. I mean, it's like, what the fuck? Libraries are public places. So that's getting into kind of a weird territory. So now they're kind of moving into bookstores so they could read stories at these bookstores. So this woman comes in. And what's her name? Hold on. What's her name? You got to get the woman's name. Her name is Genevieve. Mass resistance mother. It's Genevieve. Okay, so all right, here we go. They advertised the event October 27th, right before Halloween. In the weeks leading up to the event, local mass resistance parents called, emailed, leafleted, and even talked to the owner personally to try to convince her not to be part of the horrible agenda targeting young children. But she refused to budge and went on a schedule, right? The woman who owns a bookstore, typical, whatever. So parents fight back. The morning of the event, a mass resistance mother, Genevieve, along with another activist, Jesse, walked in with their cell phone cameras. Genevieve stood near the front and began videoing the drag queens as they made their presentation. The man stayed in the back to video their interactions with Genevieve. Before long, the bookstore owner and some other pro-LGBT activists confronted Genevieve and surrounded her. The scene began to get chaotic. The owner told Genevieve to leave, but she refused. You advertise this as a public event, she said, and I'm the public. Okay. She was fearless and didn't mince words. This is very important. Most pro-family people are afraid to express their justified outrage. Telling you that's changing. We went through this with Uranus and Aries. Everybody started to get lit up like Christmas trees. People were woke. People found their voice. People were red-pilled. Process is continuing, especially at the final degrees of Uranus and Aries. Last stand. Genevieve told them exactly what she and so many others think about their duty children, judging by their reaction. Nobody in the room had ever been rebuked that directly. Good for them. I like this. I like the fact that they are puncturing reality, right? That these things are going on as a status quo. And these women, right or wrong, are saying, stop fucking with our kids. You are getting into our kids' heads and you're polluting their minds and their consciousness. Now the bookstore owner says, listen, you don't have to be here. You have a choice. That's true. But I wonder if the bookstore owner, and I'm just throwing this out, not because, I'm doing it for ideological purposes, like I'm aligning a certain way. I like the fact that they're doing it. I like this. Okay. I like it. It's punk. This is punk rock. They're challenging the status quo. That's the status quo. Drag queens reading to our kids in libraries and bookstores has become the status quo. Believe it or not, on some level, right? Anyway. But I seriously doubt that the bookstore owner says, okay, well, we're going to have Jesus hour, and we're going to have somebody dressed up like Jesus come in here and read to the children for an hour. Because then that would allow other people to come. What would happen if that bookstore owner did that? What would happen? What kind of protests would that bookstore owner have from the other side? Jesus hour? You've got to be kidding me. How could you allow Jesus hour inside of our bookstore? Protesting Jesus hour. That would happen, right? Anyway, I digress. This is fascinating times. We're living in fascinating times. The status quo is being challenged everywhere from NBA teams. And I'm not sure I agree with their protest. They're basketball players. They need to be coached. They don't need to be coddled. But they're protesting. You've got protesters happening, big time protesters happening in France right now. Diesel, price of diesel, taxes, a general sense of anxiety about the future, right? The power to choose, this whole kind of existential cloud hanging over a country, a part of the world, a continent. What about Britain? When is Britain going to go off? When are they going to start to hit the streets because of this doddering excuse of a leader, Theresa May, who stalls, who changes language, I mean, you got to be kidding me. Those people voted for that thing to happen. And it's clear that there's a level of incompetence that's being displayed because that level of incompetence is actually a strategy. Stall, delay, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I'm going to go on the record and that if these protests continue in France, they're going to cross the channel and the English are going to protest. They're going to come out, they're going to protest against Theresa May and this whole Brexit thing. I give it 3 weeks. Could be totally wrong, but I'm looking at trends. This is what I'm seeing. Okay. Now, the reason why, I can barely look at these people. I'm sorry. But the reason why, I'm not sorry. It's like, no, I'm not sorry. It's hard to look at and deal with. Anyway, the reason why I put the link in is so you can watch the video. There's a kid, he's a kid. He's like maybe 21, 22, maybe. And he's one of the drag queens. He's not in drag. He's wearing a white baseball cap. And guess what the insignia is, or the logo on the baseball cap? It's a slice of pizza. I mean, okay. So what is going on there? Is the kid part of a mind fuck? Is he an item on a pizza menu? Is he cheese? Is that what he is? I just thought it was a fascinating aside that the kid talking about being a drag queen and combating hate and stereotypes is wearing a fucking Pizzagate cap. We live in a strange world. Anyway, I think Tucker was correct, 100% correct, and that Trump is a process. He's not a destination. Everything that's happened with Trump is a process. And it's been a really interesting and turgid process to watch. But it's about the untangling and the deconstruction. If you can't figure it out, if you can't get it, if you can't surf these waves of chaos, it's going to be very, very difficult. Very difficult. If you want to remain entrenched, it's going to be challenging. But there's something new coming, right? And I've been talking about this for a while. This is like this clash between the Apollonian and the Dionysian. You know, what we're seeing is sort of like this end of this Dionysian age and this rise of this, they're clashing, they're in conflict. But there's this Apollonian kind of urge to create some form of order. Now you get a guy like Mike Pompeo who'll jump all over that and say, well, we're creating a new liberal order. Yeah, that would work in this kind of grand Apollonian scheme of things. But really where the action is like in your own life, creating the order in your own life and to move away to some degree from the trance of the Dionysic cult. The Dionysic cult is a cult of slumber. It's a cult of hypnotic trance, reverie. And there's a place for that. There's a place for that. There's a place to sometimes slip away from the world and to allow your mind to wander and to imagine and to dream, right? This is the vision of the nocturnal. And there's a part and parcel like place for that in our experience. But we have been in this narcoticized dream for a while now. People are waking up out of the narcoticized dream. I'd say probably the most kind of true and evident piece of that's what I'm looking for, is kind of symbolic connection to that dream is the opioid crisis. Right? It's the opioid, and we're waking up to like how bad that is. We are waking up in the dream, or we are waking up in some experiences the nightmare. We're looking around and we're seeing what an absolutely freakish and nightmarish place this is, and can be. And the nightmare is getting exposed now. With every single day, we're seeing more and more of this reality that's been hidden beneath layers of reality. It's bubbling up from the surface. How can you not have an Apollonian view when it comes to something like that? When the light is turned or the light is shown on these things, or the activities or what's been behind the scenes and brewing down the rabbit hole. Last night I was hanging out at this little place in town, Silver Creek. I was watching the football game. I had a conversation with a guy at the bar and a guy behind the bar. And the guy at the bar plays in the band. I think I talked to him once or twice. Monday night band. Pretty good blues band. Anyway, I was talking to the bartender, and the guy overheard me. He says, "You must be a fan of Jim Marrs." So love Jim. He's one of the best researchers of the 20th century. The guy high fives me. And then I start to talk to the guy behind the bar. And all of a sudden now we're having a pretty high level conversation about the rabbit hole. And the guy said something interesting. He said, the rabbit hole leads you to, I said, the rabbit hole leads you to hell. He says, well, it also leads you out of it as well. And I agree with that. I agree with that. Here we are, three men, didn't know each other, all organically sort of having this conversation. We're talking about the Depression. It all started with, my theory about the Depression being one of the worst events in modern history. Like, I think people won't talk about it in the same context, but I think the Depression was equally as devastating as the Holocaust. And the Holocaust for all the sort of attendant reasons, post-Holocaust, essentially post. I mean, obviously, right? Heavy event, but it's the aftermath, right? It was the aftermath that has been really heavy on a lot of different levels. The Depression, it was a major time of Trump. So we were talking about that I was talking about with the guy at the bar, and he just, yeah, man, my father was raised by a Depression era father, and he counts his pennies all the time. We talked about how the Depression was a huge event. And that's where it all started. And next thing you know, we were got a high level dialogue. By the way, Alex Jones was in Fredericksburg on Saturday. I didn't see him. I was inside the bar, but he was having dinner at Silver Creek with his wife and his kid, trying to get out of Austin, being incognito. The spirit of revolt, it's the time that we're living in. And with Jupiter and Sagittarius, there's truth, there's moral indignation, there's some level of transparency. Look at Miley Cyrus. Not everybody's going to be right. They may be convinced of their rightness. Not everybody's going to be right. But it's the spirit of the times. It's the spirit of where we are right now. And there could be some actual revelation, an actual connection to a person, or not even a person, actual connection to truth, right? Actual connection to truth. Jupiter and Sagittarius. Watch out when it gets too close to squaring Neptune. It can get a little muddy. All right, let me check in with you guys in the chat room, see what's going on here. Robert, these people represent maybe 10% of the population. Are we good people? I agree. I agree. Right? I go back to like what's the most highly rated cable network? It's the Hallmark Channel. Look, I agree. There's a level of reality that Charles talks about, but there's another band of reality, which is the status quo, which is driven by the media. Okay, but here's what happens, Charles. You keep running that message enough and enough and enough and enough, and guess what? It's called programming, right? And I think we have to nip the programming in the bud. Any good rumors on envelope contents handed out by a Secret Service person at G.H. Bush's funeral to Biden, Hillary Clinton, George W., and Pence's wife? I think it was probably really high-grade MDMA. That's what I think. Opioids, Chiron and Pisces, maybe. Yes, absolutely. What else do we have? Straight is the new queer. I love it. That's true. The awakening equals the jig is up. Our overlords have been working on it for years. And look who's here. Rosie. There's Rosie making an appearance. You know what I did the other night? I'm going to show you. So I came out of watching the football game. It was really cold. And I was going to my truck. And I looked to my left, and they'd have like this party at this kind of winery beard place. They'd had the alley blocked off, and they had apparently they brought in these palm trees. It's freaking December, and I looked, and they had taken these palm trees, and they were throwing these palm trees away. Right? They were throwing them away, and I looked at this palm tree, and it's like this is a really impressive palm tree. You see that palm tree right there? Like they were throwing that palm tree out. Can you believe that? It's like, okay, well, it's outlived its purpose, so let's just throw it out. That is a noble palm tree. I brought this palm tree home. And I planted it. I potted it that night. Right? It's like, what's up with people? Why couldn't they just taken the freaking palm tree home and say, that's a nice palm tree? No, they're going to toss it out and make it irrelevant. Not my life. That palm tree has the right to life. Damn it. Yes. Lorax, I saved a palm tree. That's right. I feel bombed with this palm tree. If you find a palm, I have to say though, I was selective. Okay. There were 2 palm trees. One looked like I probably couldn't save it. I had to let it go. It was a slight moral dilemma. Which one do I choose? I can't have both. One is a little better off than the other. Right? Yeah. The owl has a laser and a boner. Oh, wow. There we go. I like that. It does, right? Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I added, if you're paying attention, I add things now. I'm adding things to what's going on behind me, right? All right. So I added these guys right here. Here they are. Spy versus spy. Gemini duality. Right? It's all getting played out here. There we go. Robert had also prepared a generation for World War II. Yeah, that was a bad thing, wasn't it? Not great. Not great. You read the letters of George Patton, you realize the truth about World War II. All right. Yeah, it's like bringing home a puppy. The palm tree is like bringing home a puppy, except I don't have to walk it. Wouldn't that be funny if you took out and walked your palm tree? That'd be eccentric, wouldn't it? You put a palm tree inside of like a wagon, one of those radio flyer wagons. But I'm walking my palm tree. What's the blue ribbon type picture? Oh, this is a papyrus from Egypt. Yes, my good friend Joe gave that to me a while ago. I wanted to honor her gift and put it up here. Right? Okay. I'm out of here. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to accept what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. You are you. Thank you for joining me today and making my day a brighter and happier one, as you always do. Alrighty. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And, find your voice. Find your voice and don't be afraid to use it when you need to. I'm out of here. I'll see you tomorrow.